Gospel Sound and Vision and Visual Education present The Pilgrims Progress, Part 4. The King's Highway. John Bunyan continues his story and writes, "Now I saw in my dream that after the death of Faithful, Christian wasn't left to continue alone, for he was joined by Hopeful, who became so after seeing the way Faithful and Christian stood up to the abuse of Vanity Fair. So the two went forward together. Hopeful told Christian that there were many more of the men in the fair who would follow later. They soon overtook another traveller, whom Christian soon recognized as being Mr. By-Ends, from the town of Fair Speech, a very wealthy place. By-Ends told Christian, "My friends are such people as Mr. Smoothman, Mr. Facing Both Ways, and Mr. Anything. The parson of the parish is Mr. Two Tongues. By-Ends' wife is the daughter of Lady Feigning, by the way." Christian said to him, "If you will come with us, you must go against wind and tide, and say you are a follower of Jesus Christ when people are opposed to Christianity, as well as when they favor it." But By-Ends didn't like that kind of life, and so Christian and Hopeful went on ahead. Looking back, they saw By-Ends bowing to three men called Mr. Hold the World, Mr. Moneylove, and Mr. Save All. They were old school friends. At their school, they were taught to get what they wanted by any means, including putting on a show of being religious. To pass the time, Mr. By-Ends put forward a question. "Supposing a man or minister can only get richer by, in appearance at least, becoming more religious, would he be right to do so?" Mr. Moneylove answered, "Oh yes. Supposing minister, by adjusting some of his views, could obtain a better church and a bigger income, it would be good for him. In the first place, God has given him the opportunity. Then, to be more religious is good. And finally, to adjust his views to suit the congregation shows he has self-control and a sweet spirit, commendable qualities in a minister." They all applauded this reply. Whereupon it was decided to ask the views of Christian and Hopeful, as the reply already received seemed perfect, and therefore it would win Mr. By-Ends back in favour. Mr. Hold the World put the question, and Christian replied. "The hypocritical Pharisees made long prayers only to get widows' houses, and for this received greater damnation from God. Judas the traitor was religious for the sake of the bag of money he carried, and was cast away. And further, it seems to me that a man who becomes religious for money will throw religion away for money. Your reward will be according to your works." At this withering rebuke, By-Ends and his companions fell back, without a word in reply. So Christian and Hopeful went on together to a plain called Ease. Christian said to his companion, "If those men cannot stand before the sentence of men, what will they do with the sentence of God? And if they are silent when dealt with by vessels of clay, what will they do when they are rebuked by the flames of a devouring fire?" Now the plain called Ease was so comfortable to walk upon that they moved quickly, but because it was narrow, they soon reached the other side. Here there was a little hill called Lucca, in which there was a silver mine. Some pilgrims had turned aside to see it, but going too near the edge, the ground had broken away, and they were killed. Others had been injured there, and were never themselves again. Now by the side of the mine I saw Demas, who called to Christian and Hopeful, "Hey, come and see what I can show you." Christian said, "What can be important enough to turn us out of our way?" "Why, a silver mine and some treasure for you, if you care to dig," said Demas. Hopeful wanted to go, but Christian said he'd heard of the place and how the treasure had hindered pilgrims. So Christian called to Demas, "The place is dangerous, isn't it?" Not if you are careful," he replied, but he blushed as he said it. And so Christian and Hopeful continued. But looking back, they saw By-Ends and his companions answer the call of Demas and go across. Now, whether they fell in or went in to dig, I'm not sure. but certainly they were never seen again. Just a little further on, Christian and Hopeful saw a strange old monument alongside the way. It looked like a woman in the shape of a pillar, and after a close look, Christian made out 3 words on the top: "Remember Lot's wife." Then they realized it was the pillar of salt into which Lot's wife was turned for looking back. She didn't want to leave her possessions in the city that God was destroying. "Oh, how glad I am," said Hopeful, "that I didn't go to look at Demas's mine." I saw then that they went on their way to a pleasant river, which David the king called the River of God, but John called the River of the Water of Life. The way led along the bank of the river, and here Christian and Hopeful walked with great delight. They drank also of the water of the river, which was pleasant and invigorating to their weary spirits. Besides, on the banks of the river were green trees, which love all manner of fruit, and give it freely. And the leaves of the trees were good for healing. They ate both fruit and leaves with great pleasure. Either side of the river there were meadows which were green all the year round. They spent several days and nights here, drinking the water of the river, eating the fruit and leaves of the trees, and sleeping in the meadows. Thus refreshed, they pressed on once more, but soon the way led away from the river, for which they were very sorry. The way became rough and hard, and their feet soon became sore again after all their travels, so the 2 pilgrims became discouraged, and wished for a better way, but they dared not turn out of the way. You know, the Christian life isn't always easy, and these rough parts must come, but remember our Master has been this way before. Be strong then, and press on. Now after a while they saw a meadow alongside the way, with a stile to get into it. The pilgrims didn't know it was called By-Path Meadow. Christian said, "If this follows our route, let's go over." And with that he climbed the stile to have a look. "Yes, this is fine. There's a path here running along our way. This is easier going, come on." "But supposing it leads us out of our way," said Hopeful. "Oh, that's not likely. Look, it runs alongside it," replied Christian. So Hopeful was persuaded and joined his friend. They found the path much easier for their feet, and soon up ahead they saw someone else. It was Vain Confidence. "Where does this path lead?" they called. "To the Celestial Gate," he replied. "There," said Christian to Hopeful. "Didn't I tell you so? By this you see we are right." So they followed the man. But soon the night came on, and it became dark, so that they lost sight of the man ahead. Vain Confidence, not seeing the path, suddenly fell into a deep pit, which was put there by the Prince of the Grounds, especially to catch such people, and Vain Confidence was dashed to pieces. Now Christian and Hopeful heard him fall and stopped short. They called to him, but there was no answer, only groaning. Then Hopeful said, "What shall we do?" Christian made no reply, for he was afraid he had led him out of the way. To make matters worse, it began to thunder and lighten and rain. "Oh, I wish I kept on my way," groaned Hopeful. "Who could have thought this path would have led us out of the way?" said Christian. "But I was afraid it would from the start," he replied. So Christian apologized to Hopeful, who heartily forgave him and led the way back. But it was not so easy to get back. It became darker, and they got underground where floods were rising, and 9 or 10 times they were nearly drowned, so that they had to give up. Finally, finding a little shelter, they sat down to wait for the dawn, but being very, very tired, they fell asleep. Don't you get out of the way, Christian, when the path becomes rough. It's so hard to get back on it again. Now, not far from this place there was a castle called Doubting Castle, the owner of which was Giant Despair, and it was in his grounds they were now sleeping. Getting up early in the morning, he went walking up and down his fields, and so came across Christian and Hopeful asleep in his grounds. With a grim and surly voice he told them, "Wake up! Where are you from? What are you doing in my grounds?" They told him, "We're pilgrims, and we've lost our way." Then said the giant, "You have trespassed upon me this night by lying on my grounds, so you must come with me." As he was stronger than they were, they had to obey. Also they had little to say, for they knew they were in the wrong. The giant therefore drove them before him, and put them into his castle in a very dark dungeon. Here they were to lay from Wednesday morning until Saturday night, without one bit of bread or drop of drink or light or anyone to ask how they were, only the giant. Christian was doubly miserable, for it was his fault they had ventured this way. Now Giant Despair had a wife called Diffidence, and the first night he told her about his prisoners and asked for her advice. She told him, "Go and beat them without mercy! Beat them!" The next morning, Thursday, Giant Despair went down into the dungeon with a big club. First he ranted and raved at them as though they were dogs, though they made no reply, and then he beat them so badly that in the end they were unable to even roll over. So he left them to spend Thursday in sighing and regrets. That night, hearing they were still alive, the giant's wife told him, "Encourage the prisoners to end their lives! End their lives!" So Friday morning, the giant told them, "As you will never leave the castle alive, you might as well do away with yourselves." And he offered them a knife, a rope, or poison. But they asked him to release them, whereupon he went into a rage and rushed at them, and would no doubt have finished them, but he fell into one of his fits, which he sometimes had in sunshiny weather, and lost the use of his hands. Left to themselves, the pilgrims discussed what to do, but decided that as it was wrong in God's sight to murder a man, it was more so to murder oneself, and so they resolved to hold out to the last. Friday evening, the giant came to see if they were dead, but found them still alive, though only just. He raged at them, then left them again. At night he told his wife, and upon her advice, the next day he took the two pilgrims into the castle yard. "See these bones? They are the remains of pilgrims such as you, and in 10 days I will tear you in pieces, as I did then." And with that he beat them all the way back to their den. Saturday night, Hopeful and Christian prayed from midnight until dawn on Sunday. Meanwhile, hearing they were still alive, Diffidence said, "I think they must have some means of escape with them." So Giant Despair promised to search them in the morning. Just before dawn, Christian, like a man in a dream, suddenly said, "What a fool I am to lie in this foul dungeon when we can be free! I have a key called Promise that I believe will open any door in Doubting Castle." "Brother," said Hopeful, "that's good news. Try it." The dungeon door opened easily, and they were out. The next was the outer door, which led to the castle yard, and the key opened that too. After that, they came to the iron gate, but that was very hard. They tried, and yes, the key turned. But as they pushed the gate, it was stiff and creaked, and Giant Despair awoke. In a flash, he was up, ready, and down after them. The two weak pilgrims struggled and pushed the gate open as the giant appeared, but he suddenly fell into one of his fits and lost the use of his legs and arms. So Christian and Hopeful got away. Gaining strength with every step, they quickly reached the stile and clambered back over into the way. Here they were safe, for they were in the king's highway and out of the giant's domain. Now they began to think what they could do to prevent others who followed them getting into the giant's clutches, and at last they erected a pillar and engraved on the side, "Over this stile is the way to Doubting Castle, which is kept by Giant Despair, who despises the king of the celestial country and seeks to destroy his holy pilgrims." So Hopeful and Christian went on their way singing, "Out of the way we went, and then we found what 'twas to tread upon forbidden ground."